Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode. To begin another episode about my passion for the idea of the advanced civilization. The title of today's episode is Extinction is Expected and Advanced Civilizations are Unexpected. To me, there's different approaches to look at a system of intelligent activity. And we have to consider that we are human beings that are found in a system, and we can make decisions in this system. That means compared to all the other animals in nature, the distinction that man has, the ability that mankind has, is on a totally different level. They say that what makes a human being separate from an animal, what differentiates our species from all the other species on this planet, before I even talk about if the species deserves an advanced civilization or not. A very common distinction between that at least human beings consider from animals, we don't other species, inferior species, is firstly we don't know what their first person Okay, excuse me, guys. To continue, the distinctions between the human species and other species, we don't have the first-person experience of animals. We don't know what's going on through their eyes from a first-person point of view. For example, in Hinduism and other traditions, even Buddhism, they perceive that human consciousness can behave so disaccordingly towards the world, that in some sense if a human being behaves like an inferior animal, they incarnate as an inferior animal. So there is no saying if animals are just animals, or if there's a mind field where consciousness changes bodies, you know. But pretty much what I'm saying is that animals are not conscious that they are conscious. Human beings are conscious that they are conscious. We are conscious. Animals, they do not have a sense of their future, as in with what time they're gonna die. You know, we human beings, we became conscious of the environment. We pinpointed a change in space as time, and then we project this change of space and time as our future, and then we know where we're heading, right? So in this moment, I'm in a moment of present existence. I wonder about like the next 100 years, and I don't see myself in that picture. But one can say the way we see animals, inferior species now, is that pretty much they're not conscious of death. That means they are not worried, depressed. They don't have anxiety that they're gonna end. Like many creatures in nature, they don't care about the survival of their species. They care about the survival of themselves. So if we say that animals are not conscious when it comes to their intelligence, in the sense that they don't know where they're going to end up, I can say that human beings have that additional dimension. I'm really stretching this point, but pretty much human beings are conscious of their death, conscious that at some point reality is going to end, and other animals are not conscious that reality at some point is going to end. Another distinction between human beings and animals, inferior species, is our sophistication of the use of language. Our creative ability when it comes to other creatures is next level. We don't see penguins opening nightclubs. We don't see, wolves in Wall Street. It is only the Homo sapien, the human being, in some sense the descendant of the chimp that in some sense this world has been given to, at least for its intelligence. Sorry guys, in this episode actually my attention midway through speaking is also going to, my neighbors in front of me. But anyways, I'm trying to say that we are creatures in a world. We have a sophisticated advantage that other creatures on the planet don't have. And if we were to look at the fulfillment of our creative conscious advantage as creatures, it would be in some sense where it's as if matter became aware of itself at a certain point in history, and then it's trying to not change from that, right? If in the future it becomes cool for everybody to be a robot, there's going to be human beings that are going to be like, no, I don't want to be a robot. And where's that urge coming from? The urge to preserve the first awakening. We have awakened in biological reality. Now in the future, the human beings, they may awaken, they may transition from a biological reality into a technological reality. You can say there could be, let's say, an extraterrestrial that lands and reveals with humanity like a total technology that we had no clue we could access even beyond cyberspace, right? So there's so many possibilities because the world is like this giant dark forest and humanity is like this small camp in this giant dark forest, and everybody, every camp member has a flashlight, has an intelligence that moves on the planet. There was something I learned that was incredible from Elon Musk. It really fits the essence of this episode. I was looking into videos on how to run a business, and I came across some advice Elon Musk, as a next level genius entrepreneur, he was giving. And Elon Musk, he's this guy who started a rocket company, an electric car company, a solar power company, He's building the Hyperloop, taking people to Mars. So what was this man's mindset when he was running his business? And one of the videos where he was being interviewed, he shared it. And he said pretty much when he wanted to start a rocket company, for example, one of his friends came up to him and showed him a video of all the rockets destroying at launch. That means it's such a waste of money. So Elon Musk, he said that when he started the business, he actually was not afraid, or he did not have an emotional attachment to the success of the business. He wasn't like, I have to be successful or it's over. Even though there is survival of a business, let's say, what? Elon Musk's approach was that he is assuming his business is going to fail, and every day he wakes up, he reduces the percentage of failure. What that means is he's not worried about the outcome that he wants to avoid. In some sense, when you accept the inevitable, you find the strength to build things. So Elon Musk was like, all right, this business is going to fail, but every day I'm going to reduce the percentage of its failure. Now, I thought, why are we just seeing this for a business? Why are we just approaching this for a business? The human being is in the business of survival. And so could it be that we can establish an idea of an advanced civilization, but not with an egotism that's like, I'm the best. We don't want fascist, truth bringers. What we want is somehow work with the multidimensional freedom that we have as a species, and in some sense end up with the best outcome. Worst case scenario, extinction. Pretty much extinction is the failure of the human business, the human enterprise. Now, the advanced civilization is the unexpected, so if we manage to reduce the percentage of extinction based on how we live as a human being on this planet, we in some sense increase the possibility of the advanced civilization. So we're at a point in history right now where we can't just be like, all right, we got to build an advanced civilization. We're at a point where we plant the seeds which will reduce the failure of the percentage of the failure of extinction. So that's a very important approach I'm taking to this episode, to this idea extinction is expected, advanced civilizations are unexpected. Throughout these talks I've been giving, as the days have been going by, and I've been looking at the world and try to sharpen my intellect, I have come to a realization that there is something where I would like to coin it the advanced civilization effect. Like, I feel this should be generally understood, that an advanced civilization is not something that just creatures build, it is the ultimate destination of individual objectivity. One of the ultimate destinations before it reaches a state where it's deciding to be non-physical. Right now, every human being on the planet, I'm pretty sure most, I'm not going to say all, but let's say most human beings on the planet, they actually accept instantaneously their physical existence. I don't know anybody who can move their body without accepting what they are. We accept our existence, and then we have an access to experience it. It's the same with people, by the way. If a person cannot accept another person, they cannot understand it. So this is the challenge of understanding things, that even if when it comes to problems, this is something that people don't say. Sometimes when a problem comes, most people, they want to function in a state of mind where the problem doesn't exist. Right? I totally understand that. The person's like, I got a problem, but I don't have any problems, and they function with that mentality. But to me, the problem has geometry, and anything that has geometry must be observed deeply. Anything that has shape is a clue, and in some sense is a string to be pulled which will reveal its connection to greater geometry. So sometimes when it comes to solving problems, as Albert Einstein very beautifully says, he says, you cannot solve a problem from the same state of consciousness that created it. That means if we are seeing extinction, that's a state of mind, right? And if we want to solve the problem, we can't just be in a state of mind of extinction. So in that approach that, for example, Elon Musk was taking to a business, if we take that approach, we actually accept extinction in the sense that we saw it, and now we're trying to see more. Right? So it's as if the consciousness is moving. Even when it comes to psychological development in regards to the concepts of nirvana, moksha, enlightenment, what is the significance of these? Why would a human being even on this earth bring up the topic of some sort of transcendental state of being where there is unconditional, there is no longer conditional karma or suffering, right? A lot of people understand the concept of karma, but they don't understand the significance of it. The idea of karma is that you caused your effect, And because you caused your effect, and because this moment is an effect of something you as an intelligence, not as a human, as an intelligence have done here, the source, in some sense, to be freed from the state of mind of the effect, one has to remember the cause. That is simply it. That means pretty much you open your eyes in the world and you want to figure out what this is before you are a person in a world. Now, this approach is very mystical. What that means is in these talks, I cannot ignore a mystical dimension of my own experience. It's like when I come to talk about something, eventually my direct experience checks into the moment, you know. So, beyond a sort of, I would say, psychological framework in the space-time continuum where subjects are being overlaid on an objective reality. Sorry guys, this was on mute and I was just firing away. Pretty much I was saying that the subjective experience of our humanism is a bridge between an attributeless state of being and an attribute-full state of doing. When it comes to what we do, I mean, every person's psychology has to start from space. Just like you need space in your house to bring in new furniture. If the whole space was filled with furniture, you could not bring in new furniture. And if we say the psychology of the human being is how the human intelligence is inhabiting an unknown world, it's as if every moment we are creating the staircase of our perception, or we are finding the door of experience. As Aldous Huxley says, Aldous Huxley has this remarkable quote. He says, there are things known and things unknown, and in between are the doors of perception. What that means, in between are the doors of perception, it means that one's state of mind is revolving. I perceive it as a revolving door. You know, Aldous Huxley wasn't detailed about what kind of door of perception this is, but I would say it's a revolving door of perception, where if one stays in a certain energetic state, they will actually notice they're cycling through ideology from its animation in the inner realms to its dismissal in the inner realms. And here's the cool thing about, I mean, just to take this back to the idea of advanced civilizations being the unexpected. If we consider that there are two dimensions to life, and I'm going to take this back to the inner realms and the outer realms, human beings have access to an outer space where it's like free given imagination. You don't have to imagine existence, it is already there. You know, and because it is unknown, there is endless imaginary extraction from existence. That means till the end of time, there is endless new ideas waiting, just like us being in the campground of the forest and taking our lanterns, taking our, what do you call it? It's as if we are using our flashlights of consciousness to explore an unknown dark place. And the more we explore, the more new archetypes we find. So there is a possibility of infinite models of humanism in the void, or I should say in the unconscious. So in our outer space, it's a film where the laws of nature and the laws of physics are in some sense are containing. In the inner space, nobody has spoken about laws, right? For example, some people say, sure, there's the law of love or the law of attraction, where your psychology intends something robotically until it happens, right? Or there are systems of thought I personally know where the human being works with their subconscious. What does that mean? That means the brain is playing this film of a character in a world, but this character in a world is actually being played on a pure mechanistic system. So that means if somebody says, let's say they're talking to a friend and they're like, yeah man, I don't know, life is tough, I never catch a break. That person is actually programming their subconscious, because the subconscious is the component to the intelligence that doesn't care about the emotions. It takes the words for face value. Right? That means anytime somebody says something where just the geometry of the concept is let's say unnecessary or inefficient, their subconscious takes that as an instruction. So if I say I hate myself jokingly, the subconscious is like, I heard I hate myself, so I'm gonna hate myself. You see what I mean? So that's kind of like working with the subconscious. If we treat the outer space as an elemental film, I would say the inner space is actually a sort of experience where, at least my exploration of it so far has been, I've pretty much sat still and silent, and in that stillness and silence, I've watched what happens to my mind. And you know what happens to the mind of a person when they stop doing anything and they're just sitting still and silent in a moment watching it? The mind begins to live its impulses. It begins to live out its impulses. So I would say for the first 10 to 20 minutes of silent meditation, your mind is trying to fulfill every urge it picked up throughout, the conscious event. You know how people like sit down and they're like, yo man, I'm trying to meditate, but I have too many thoughts. What do I do with this? The approach is simply that it's just a minefield. Once you get past the minefield, there is no sudden explosion of states of mind. Right? And it depends on how aware the person is to their inner space, or they can get ideologically possessed. Ideological possession means information dominated the free will's freedom, the free will's opportunity. That's what ideological possession means. That means, imagine there's a young child in this world, and this young child at an early age is told, you can't do anything right, And this young child goes into this world being like, oh man, everything I do isn't working, not realizing that everybody actually has to put in an effort to master their craft if they want to be successful, right? We are a biological instrument that upon repetitions and how much we practice with it, we master. It's the same as the muscle idea, right? People go to the gym, they take their muscles to a breaking point, the muscle fibers break, and what is it? It's like recommended 4 to 6 reps. Anything more, it becomes like a bit inefficient. So in that range of repetition, the muscle is being taken to failure. When the muscle is being taken to failure, it's reaching its pressure. It's like hitting a pressure threshold. And so what's going to happen is the muscle's not going to be able to take the pressure, so it rips. So sometimes in life, if you're someone who has experienced suffering, you have actually grown new muscle, poetically. Your morality, your psychology has grown muscle, right? So there is no downside to anything that happens in this world, because ultimately it enters our experiential memory archive, The advanced civilization effect is just, again, a natural emergence. That means what happens when you get a bunch of creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere? They start talking. They start moving first, okay? Then what do these creatures do on a rock in the middle of nowhere after they've started moving? They start talking. That means their minds begin to move. First our bodies moved, and we in some sense acknowledged it, and now our minds are moving, and we're required to acknowledge it. Now the way we acknowledge the movement of the body was through the development of the mind, but now comes the question, how can we acknowledge the movement of the mind? And that comes from the development of the inner witness. Hence why I am so keen on using the idea of within, go within, go within. Why? Because there is an inner dimension to life. Now that inner dimension, I follow the school of thought where I poetically, just for the sake of speech, call it soul or presence beyond personality, but what it is a non-ideological state, right? So if we are creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, going through a phase of evolution through objects, going through a phase of evolution through subjects, we will inevitably reach a point where we will get to the language threshold. You know, I had this theory, and for a long time I was wondering, am I the only one that it goes beyond language, right? But then I found other mystics in the past who had made a comment to it. And one of the most incredible poems dedicated to, I would say indirectly dedicated to the language threshold. That means this poem's from 700 years ago, but I coined the concept of the language threshold in, like, I think it was 2015 or something. So the poet Rumi says, listen to this poet from 700 years ago. He's sharing his experience. He's pretty much talking about the evolution of consciousness as a sort of transcendence beyond the subject of being. So he says, I died as a mineral. This is the poet Rumi saying this. He says, I died as a mineral and I became a plant. I died as a plant and I rose to animal. I died as an animal and I was man. Then he says, why should I fear death? When was I less by dying? I shall die once more to soar with angels blessed. But even from angelhood I must pass on to that which no mind has ever conceived. Our destination as intelligence is inconceivable. Our body has to go to its most conceivable limit, and our mind is going to its most inconceivable limit. So human evolution and the advancement of civilization is the phase beyond the great non-physical awakening of creaturehood. That means we think that there has been no civilizations in the past that have made it through a certain point in history, right? That means there are no civilizations that made it beyond the atmosphere, set up shop in other planets, and, like, you know, after we could go beyond the atmosphere, we could see them. You know, there was no, let's say, human remnant or human and ancient civilization, advanced ancient civilization remnant on other planets. So what that kind of shows is that evolution has been getting to a certain level, but endlessly falling, not able to overcome that level of its own extinction, right? So extinction is literally the exit of an advanced collective movement, ultimately. To be human in a world where the idea of human didn't exist until we got here is to truly be in the presence of an unknown world. The advanced civilization can only arise from those who have noticed the unknown consciously enough to retaliate to it. So many human beings, because the problem is too big, the problem of how the species is gonna you know, where the species is going to get to. It's so big that most people, I think, treat it like an art problem, where they're like, just draw whatever, man. The species will figure something out. You know, the species will do something. But for me, because I am temporarily here, as many human beings alive right now, we all have, it's as if we have logged in to Earth, and we're like, what do? We've logged into this elemental server where we are a conscious player in, and there's this gigantic unconscious and unknown landscape. And so what does this player do in this simulation of reality? Now, even though in ancient thought there was this view that life is a dream and you got to escape this simulation of the illusion of reality, I would say, and there's like, we can say maybe there's like two ways to escape the simulation. One is you don't do anything in the video game that you've logged into, and so you stand there so much idle that eventually you automatically log out of the you know, reality. Or we can say you actually play the game and you do what you were meant to as a character, as a designed character in the world, right? Because being an elemental creature is like being an actor on a stage you didn't sign up for, you just appeared on. You know, guys, I look at human psychology every day, and I at least look at one human psychology all the time, which is my own. And you know, I realize that really this illusion, this idea that we're just a mirage in an elementally void desert is such a flaw. It's such an error that it's like being ignorant of what we're given. I feel we should develop a civilization that honors people's login time. That means an advanced civilization is like, yo, a new human being has been born, great. New human being with new eyes, help the world that you're in once. For me, civilization, just to, you know, develop the picture a bit further, the advanced civilizations actually have two starting points. What that means is it has to start from the inner realms and it has to start from the outer realms. In the outer realms, we have reached a paralysis of resource management, and information can be seen as a resource. So we have mismanaged information, and we have reached the paralysis of the outer realms where people have stopped caring for the future of their species. They haven't stopped caring for their own future. Many people haven't stopped caring for their own future, but the future of the species means there are so many questions and challenges ahead that we haven't even explored yet. We don't even know what they are. That means it's as if I feel as a member of the human kingdom being like, hey, humanity, you know, it's as if what is beyond the walls of what we have defined, what we have given meaning to, what we have painted for ourselves, right? You know, it is true that there are some human beings who they live like a mirror. I personally have lived like a mirror in so many moments. I can't tell you, like, and if I was to explain to you what I mean by this, that means I have been in moments and I have literally done nothing, and the moment has solved itself. As if I was a mirror, and whatever was communicating to me or whatever pressure or intensity was coming, it just reflected back. Do you know? It was like, I'll give you an example. It's like there was this video, there's this dog, this German Shepherd, very calmly walking, okay? And suddenly there's a wild bear, and this bear runs up to the German Shepherd, but this dog is so grounded in its presence. It's such a, you know, it's such its own world that the dog doesn't flinch. And the bear that attacked the dog freaks out because in some sense it's not a normal animalistic reaction, right? Because power doesn't mean you push the small. You know, power means in some sense how much you had access and how much you share that access or are grounded in that access. You know, being young and being around a metaphysical ideology, like I had no choice. Every human being is born in a part of the world, and waves of information through the filters of cultures, the people around the person, the books around the person, all this stuff, waves of information hit the individual. If the child that is born into this world where waves of information are hitting it, if it believes the information, it gets defined by it. If it doesn't, the unknown is kept alive for a new approach to appear. We have to build the advanced civilization behind our eyes, which means we have to have one common design of the future, one geometrical vision of the future that all human beings are like, all right. That means we have, once we have 8 billion thumbs up, for an advanced civilization, that means in our inner realms, we have decided that we're going to attempt the greatest thing human beings can do before they enter the world. In other talks, I called it the songs of an advanced civilization. That means at some point in the evolution of creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, they start noticing their greater possibility. The moment they start noticing their greater possibility, new archetypes find them. Because the reason the importance of the idea of the advanced civilization is that it is engageable. Because it's an engageable concept, a person can have honor with it, right? There is, like back in the day, if you go look at honor was as if like the world was held in a true way, and the person had held the world in that, let's say the person who had held the world in that true way, whatever happened in the world, they were staying true to the truth of their own eyes, right? For example, religious people honor religious ideology, scientists honor, the scientific method. So that means human beings are honoring different shapes, different modalities of perception. But I am saying we must begin to honor the advancement of everyone. That means imagine somebody one day suggested, hey, let's start a project on this earth where its result will be, it will influence everybody's life. Because an advanced civilization doesn't have time for judgment. It just wants to instantly receive feedback from all dimensions fathomable, and then eventually once you put the imported information beside one another, a new system develops, right? So you can say even before systems theory, before we theorize any sort of, let's say let's say you're an inventor, but you don't want to invent an object, or just a mechanical system. You want to invent a cultural system, right? Because that's really what life is. It's just how our ancestors left the world and how we are walking in it and how much we want to change it as we walk in it, right? Imagine right now that the human history is like a company. Just imagine 8 billion human beings, they are employed by the earth. The earth is the employer. And imagine you as an employee of earth, you're like, okay, so I've joined this company, and I know that the more successful company the company is, the more financial energy it has to help its employees. So imagine you start actually for the first time looking around you and realizing, okay, there's so many employees in this company who don't care for their job. That's an advantage for those who suddenly start caring, right? So if you try in whatever you do, whether it's washing dishes, whether it's moving furniture, right? Whether it's moving, laws of nations, or if it's moving, industries, right? Whatever it is, if you just attempt the greatest vision fathomable, right? I will tell you, the lords of karma will be like, okay, you at least tried. You get points for that. We are an energy. We are an energy that can be directed. We are an energy that can take the world towards a completely non-physical destination. We can pilot to emptiness, or we can pilot to infinity. Or we can stay in singularity, or we can stay in duality. I feel oneness, it gets boring. I feel duality, it gets boring. You know, emptiness becomes like this giant door where you don't know what's behind emptiness. But when you look at infinity, you can consciously access. So it's as if emptiness is a no exit for consciousness, but infinity, the infinite state, is an entrance for consciousness. I would think of 4 possible types of advanced civilizations that can be created. That means I would say, okay, let's say we designed an advanced civilization so advanced where in the future, if there were disembodied beings, let's say from the 0 dimension in the sense that they were just space, the advanced civilization would be able to communicate with intelligent empty space, or what appears to be an empty space. So we would be able to communicate with fields of intelligence of a void nature. So we in some sense have a civilization that can communicate with the void, that can acknowledge the void. We have an advanced civilization that can acknowledge the singular. When it comes to the singular, that means there may be human beings in the future, and we're like, hey, human being, what do you identify as? And the human being's like, I identify as the whole presence of the universe. There is no person here. I am nature incarnate. You know, in its own collective memory, right? So you could say that certain yogis or those truth seekers who cultivated the highest truth, the ultimate, they became Mahatma. That means they witnessed the great soul of the universal sector move, and so their character shifts. So that's like union. So those people who are like just if you want to identify as a field of intelligence in an advanced civilization, the advanced civilization will provide accommodations for that, you know. So let's say now we all are really dualistic beings. That means our body is kind of between form and space. You know, our psychology is between the good and the bad, our morality. Reality is between light and darkness. If there was no light, there would be no concept of darkness, and without darkness, we would not be able to know there's something such as light. So the advanced civilization will 100% be, it's as if the advanced civilization is being built, or the seeds of the advanced civilization is being planted by dualistic entities, right? Right now, duality may be perceived as the sort of ignorance of the demonic, right? In certain traditions, mystic traditions, the concept of, for example, the devil was not the devil. It was just duality, how there was chaos and order. That means any system of order, there's a chaos preserving it. Any system of chaos, there's an order preserving it. And I don't know if many people know this, but for example, this is of course a very esoteric concept, but it is something actually theological. For example, you know, as someone born in Iran, I know that in the Quran there is passages that talk about, for example, a prophetic figure known as Suleiman, right? And Suleiman was this human being that through some divine authorization, he had complete control over another dimension. Now, all those creatures in that dimension, they started with a mindset of hate, but when it comes to divine law, it cannot be hated or loved, really. I don't know how you can love a law. You know, it's just a quality of the being of nature, right? Maybe we love the freedom that laws provide, whether divine laws, natural laws, or even unnatural linguistic-based laws, you know? An advanced civilization regardless of whatever framework, it will accompany creaturehood at the highest caliber. It doesn't matter if it's an extraterrestrial that lands, or if it's in some sense animals in the future, inferior species, they suddenly wake up to human consciousness, or they wake up to, through advanced AI technology, animals become like citizens of the civilization, imagine in the future a dolphin in a giant robotic kind of like, robot-limbed kind of capsule of water walking in the street. It's as if like you go to a store and the store owner is a dolphin, and it's a dolphin that has started a business, through a government grant, imagine, inside an advanced like water suit or something, So I'm saying that in the future, it's like many different phenomenologies can begin connecting to the human idea. So whether it's other animals, whether it's androids, robots, whether it's extraterrestrials, whether it's other unknown archetypes, that means imagine like Frankenstein's monster, right? Imagine in the future something happens with Frankenstein's monster. I mean, Frankenstein's monsters was kind of a mis-experiment on humanism, but I would say, it doesn't matter what kind of creature you are. The advanced civilization judges intelligence in accordance of how much consciousness to the room of manifestation there is. That means it's like, for me, it's not that human beings have a greater soul than animals, because the moment we have the concept of a world soul, we're all engulfed in it. Sorry guys, I'm a bit nasally today. What I'm really suggesting is that the human brain is a biochemical probability projector, a subjective probability projector. Every moment, even right now as I'm talking, in my inner realms, all that's happening is like universes are lining up, and my attention goes on that content in the inner realms, and I have something to speak about. I would say there is no such thing as thinking, because thinking limits actually the antenna. If you think you're a certain type of thinker, though this is why they would say in ancient traditions and in wisdom traditions, they would say be humble. Why? Why would they say you got to be honest, humble, and simple when it comes to divinity? Because that's the best, clearest state of the antenna. When a human being is selfless, you're not carrying the weight of your own idea all throughout the day. That means I could tell you, there's some times where people have come to me and they're like, how do you have so much energy? And I tell them it's because I am not a self that is losing energy, and I am not a self that is gaining energy. I am just the moment being before I have an opinion on it, and that is an incredibly energetic state. So anyways, an advanced civilization, in the past there were seeds planted, which the present enjoys those fruits and the shade of those trees. Now in the present there must be seeds planted where the future will enjoy those fruits and the shade of those trees. I want to see human behaviorism advance. I want all human beings to try while they're alive to see what is the most advanced possibility. And I'll tell you, eventually human beings will conclude it is multidimensional tolerance for infinite expressionism. I should probably give a talk on this. Let me write it down. Multidimensional tolerance of infinite expressionism. That means theoretically, what would the most advanced civilization look like? It would look like a civilization that is instantly updating infinitely. It would be an instantaneous infinitude. So what that means is, in the future, if truly this vision I have of the advanced civilization, and which I feel is like it's part of the karma of the planet, right? There's a region, like even before I was born, there was the legend of kingdoms in the sky, castles in the sky. But when it comes to man's time, the human beings, 2021, we will be of the first species that built mechanical kingdoms in the sky, right? I want to see that day, where the children of this world are staring at the earth from above it, right? And then we have a full ideological control, right? Because we are observing physically our detachment from the earth. Can you imagine, I'll tell you, it's like we see this in astronaut psychology, especially astronauts that return from the space station. I've seen interviews and videos online. The astronaut returns from the space station and is holding his cup in the air and lets go of his cup, but his cup falls down on the ground because he's been in the space station so much at zero gravity. The cup would stay in the space station wherever you left it, but in reality gravity pulls it down, right? So we find a nostalgia. That means it doesn't matter if we live on the in the sky, we live in the orbit, we live beyond, we're gonna have nostalgia of our origin, right? And this is really why they say every human being has to connect to their cultural roots to some degree, right? Not be obsessively, shackled by a certain image of the past, but to understand why the image of the past was there, right? To understand why your ancestors opened their eyes in the way they did, right? This is really, you can say, like, three components to knowledge: information about the past, information about the present, and information about the future. Information about the past is already created, it just has to be found. Information of the present has to be noticed. It's also already created, it just has to be noticed. Information for the future has to be created. And how many human beings are like, think about it, how many creatures on this rock are too preoccupied with existential survival to even wonder about the advancement and evolution of the intelligence? We have built a society for bodies, not realizing that we're actually minds projecting the meaning of the body in every moment. So we actually have to build a civilization for minds. If the mind is a multidimensional event witnesser or event generator or antenna, if it's a multidimensional experience, I don't know if this is the proper term, but experientiology. Some English professor's probably screaming right now, but I'll say accessology. Experience gives us values, and how we place those values in our perception, right? How in some sense the world is kept in an axis of perception, axis of. In an advanced civilization, human beings would have so many better things to do than fight and kill each other. They would have so many better things to do than to witness each other's defeat. For the first time, it's going to be a civilization where you turn on the news and you're like, how is it possible? All the channels are just showing how civilization is advancing in every moment. Right now we're in a phase where people watch TV and they're like, oh my God, what is up with all this advertisement frenzy, right? But in the future, it's going to be such intellectual, educational content. That means I have this prediction. I have made some predictions. I've made this prediction that the educational systems are going to become businesses, and businesses are going to become educational systems, and they're going to become one type of institution. So all employers, their business will become a sort of school, and in some sense, all schools will become businesses, and this is the case really now. What I'm saying, it's gonna, on one side, schools are businesses, but businesses are not schools yet, right? Because it would be as if everybody is endlessly continuing their education, but their education is being continued by their employer, right? By what their employer is providing for them. So we in some sense begin caring for the mind, and we realize the mind is starving for knowledge in an unknown world. And so it's approached as starving for the unknown world. Like, what do you do when you're a starving person? You actually find food. And so if you have decency, you find food correctly. If you are indecent, you take food, But I will tell you, we don't want to have that approach to knowledge where people are taking knowledge, right? I want to see this approach where everybody feels that information moves in a field, and anytime a human being speaks, they're just sharing geometry into that field. That means nobody owns a thought. Even though we have to live as if there is, of course, copyright in this world, but I'm telling you, they're really, in reality, because it's a giant film, and many factors, think of as if human beings not just being an energetic object or vehicle moving. This vehicle actually leaves off an imprint on the day, you know. For example, when I give these talks, I give a cough, you know, when I cough, like that leaves an imprint on the environment. And really, it's the story we tell ourselves that gives us our power. If somebody makes themselves a side character in the world, you'll always see karma pushing you. I'll be honest, I personally experienced this to such a degree where I was like, universe, what are you doing with my karma? And then I realized the universe was actually letting me pilot the moment, but because I was ignorant, I was piloting it recklessly. You know, it's as if the universe is like, what do you want, man? And man's like, freedom. And the moment the universe gave man ultimate freedom, he became responsible for his movement, for his intelligence. And what are we doing? I mean, what is evolution doing? Evolution made an object to us, become a subject to itself. You know, what part of that is material? Even the concept of a force is not material, because of phenomenology and matter, elements in matter, they have, like, what do they call it? I mean, I know the term half-life, but pretty much elements in the periodic table, they have a sort of life cycle, right? So if matter has a life cycle, meaning it has a starting position and an ending position, it's going through a cycle of change. A force, which is just a dynamism of change, is not an object in any way. So the concept of force is not a physical concept in science. Therefore, it's in some sense, as the concept of energy is literally like the idea of the soul. The soul cannot be created or destroyed. It is in some sense transforming from different body to body to the point where Buddhists have sutras on reincarnation. Right? But when it comes to energy, we're like, yeah, energy can't be created or destroyed. What if consciousness is energy? That means consciousness cannot be created or destroyed. The energy just goes from potential kinetic to the end of time. Right? So I'm saying, if consciousness is an energy, it is the proof of the soul, which cannot be created or destroyed and endlessly transforms. Energy is the proof of the soul, if we see attention and existence simultaneously. And we have to honor every branch of civilization. That means in an advanced civilization, you know, there would be no person of doing lesser work or higher work. There would not be this class system anymore. It would just be this idea where we're all human beings, and some people, if their work is physical, they are serving the body of the advanced civilization. If their work is non-physical, let's say communication, they're serving the mind of the advanced civilization, right? That means I don't have like the resources to build a city right now or try to attempt a new kind of physical civilization, but I have the energy to, in some sense, communicate an advanced civilization. And I'm looking at the probabilities of my moment, and I'm like, okay, this is the least, with the least I can do the most kind of strategy. You know, this picture I chose, guys, was really, I don't know who drew it. Whoever knows the artist, please write it in the comment section so I can update the description of the video. This artwork is an incredible suggestion of in how many ways civilization has evolved. I will give this artwork the year 2209. Yeah, I would think in the year 2209 it would look like this, to a point where fashion has evolved, where imagine people are connecting tails and wings to themselves. Imagine that vehicles have the shape of animal life. That means we looked at whales and we're like, why don't we create whales in the sky, which became our starships. We looked at the vertical geometry of architecture and we're like, what if we develop the next level curvature? And if you look at this, the building at the far end, this circular kind of building, you can see on the right side behind the girl's angel wings, the building is not fully constructed. That means you're seeing a picture of, a building not fully finished in the background, the circular building. Now, what this means is that because bricks and gravity cannot stay in that way, most likely there is a sort of curvature in the skeletal system, I would say, of the architecture of the building, or there is force field technology. That means, imagine in the future, you can make a giant invisible force field that nothing can touch or go through, and it's eternally powered. That means till the end of time, the force field is there if it's connected to, let's say, a sort of power system. And so imagine a giant invisible sphere being a sort of space in the moment. So imagine you're walking in the moment, you're walking in a grassland, in this grass field, and you suddenly hit this invisible sphere and you're like, yo, why can't I keep walking in this grass field, right? And the moment you notice the invisible sphere, imagine that invisible sphere becomes a no penetration zone of matter. So in some sense, it becomes an untouchable physical moment in the space-time continuum, a non-physical physical experience. Sorry, guys. I think I gotta slow down on these talks, They have the toll on the person's voice. I'm giving these talks like I'm in the Amazons, or I'm like in a sort of, tribal. I'll be honest. I mean, the human psychology functions at different energy levels. That means a person doesn't have one archetype. A person has an archetype when their energy level is low. A person has an archetype when their energy level is high. For some people, when their energy level is low, their alignment to a sort of class of behavior changes, right? So I can tell you, a soldier on a battlefield may not eat his lunch with like a spoon and a fork, may just eat the lunch with his hands. But let's say royalty inside a palace is like eating, their lunch with, like, I don't know, 4 types of forks or something, you know what I mean? So it depends on the intensity of the moment. When it comes to biological, physical suffering, we seek instantaneous relief. To seek instantaneous relief, there means that it is a disregard for character, right? Now, we are 8 billion characters in the void. These 8 billion characters have an option to be passengers and wait for human beings, pilots, to end up in the world to share new information, or every human being can be an explorer, and in some sense, anytime you wonder how you are in a form, the information updates. The human being is an animal, ladies and gentlemen. What that means is we should not get offended by anything because they're from such a level of savageness we have come from. Can you imagine in the medieval era? Imagine in the era where swords and shield was like the most advanced technology. Okay, and imagine warriors would walk, or imagine you went to a town and the people in the town were like, who is this person, right? And they wanted to, for example, kill you. Imagine in medieval times, right? So it would be a situation where their mind had not developed for proper discourse, or it was in the developing phase of discourse, and really it was intense reactive response to a circumstance, right? So in the future, like let's say two people are walking in a forest and they are both warriors, right? And they see each other for a moment, right? Now they have 2 options. They either calmly walk past each other, or a battle will begin. Right? Because the psychology is territorial. The same way wolves piss their territory, human beings act out their territory. And again, guys, I apologize for the for the additional extra noises in the podcast. Like, I hope that your attention goes to the content rather than who's sharing the content. I'll be honest, I personally in this life don't take myself too seriously. I understand that in the outer realms, I have a very simple attitude. I'm like, whatever happens is like my nervous system, alright? You know, it's just the biology taking it. It's like the antenna, you can't judge. Everybody is like born as an antenna, right? So the type of antenna you are, you can't really judge it, you accept it, but the type of signals you receive, that's where judgment is really necessary, right? But I shouldn't say judgment, I should say multidimensional tolerant observance before action upon the observed. You know, I'm so, I would say I'm very old school, you know, and I think I have, this is kind of like also my cultural background as well. You know, Iran was a country that at some point it had a monarchy. So my background's from Iran. Iran had a king, you know, had a lineage of human beings who had cared for the advancement of a collective system. And of course, Iran's history, it's as if the monarchy was overthrown by religious law, right? So we have a religious system of ideology possessing a monarchy, right? And what that means is, like, back in the day, you could say there was, think of it this way, back in the day, what did people have? What were the powerful institutions? Oh my God, I gotta change the song. Back in the day, what did people have? What were the power institutions? There was, for example, in Europe, there was the Inquisition, you know, in Spain. So there was the religious authorities. Religion was an incredible power system. The more we go back in history, the more we go forward, the less it's becoming a power system. But back in the day, it was an intense power system, right? Then we had, in some sense, politics, which, like, we have like a king, one of the Louis, I think it was Louis the 14th, where they asked him, "Hey Louis, how do you want to run your country?" And he's like, "I am the state," and all this, like, officials were like, "Calm down, man. Okay, you're the state, you're the emperor." Right? So we had monarchy, royalty as a power institution, and then we had divine authority. So we had divine authority, we had off-planet authority, and we had on-planet authority, right? On-planet authority was the monarch, off-planet authority was God, the monarch of the universe, right? This is why the kings were seen to have to actually, religion was such a giant power system that even the kings had to be honorable. Like, being a religious person back in the day was equivalent to being like a politician in modern times. It was like very important role. Right now it's kind of being dismissed, and for multiple reasons, but like so anyways, there was a sort of king idea, and this king ideology, right, at some point, right, it was church and state infused, and then church and state separated, right? But Iran is a country where something strange happened. After church and state separated, you know, it was the moment people were the idea, the concept of royalty, kingdoms and kings, and an important rhythm in human history, I would say, in some sense. Once the king ideology began going down, as if it was like for the first time the concept of a kingdom was attacked by modernity, right? And so as the concept of royalty diminished as a power system in the eyes of the people, if Iran was a country where the religious power, instead of calming down, it took hold, right? So Iran is a country where it's like from the remnants of the honor of a kingdom, of an empire, now it is in some sense consumed and devoured or possessed by a religious ideology. So you can say stories don't possess people, they can also possess nations. But the issue is freedom. That means, for me, I really don't. I'll be honest. I'm a bit like, I don't care what ideological systems nations have, as long as it is giving, realizing the human life is a divine experience. It is literally as if, like in religion, they say human beings have souls, and the soul is the secret of God, in the sense that it is God. Like God, it's how God in blue, like in Abrahamic traditions, pretty much God blows air, like it's like an airbending thing, where it's like God gives a command for man to exist, then imbues of his own essence into man. So if human beings are carrying the essence of God, the lack of freedom of the human being means that the person is acting like a god before God. So religious authority could be actually, in some sense, acting like God when there is actually a God up there. Because if you don't believe there is a God up there, you act like a god. Right? But if you believe there's a God up there, how can you act like a God? And if a religious system is acting as an authority, it is in some sense claiming godhood, even though it's believing in God. So you can say there are religious systems that are actually so non-religious in their desire, in how their indirect desires are unfolding. Because to be a religious being means you are trying to transcend the human, at least from the theological lens, the human sin. Right? Because if you're a religious person, you're like, okay, Adam messed up. And when Adam messed up, God could not forgive man. But when Adam came onto earth, if man acted accordingly, God could forgive man. You see? Whether we are the children of atoms or we are the children of Adam, right? Whatever kind of story we see, for me it's freedom. It's like we're in advanced technology. If you're living in a world where it's not allowing you to access the most advanced opportunity of this advanced technology, then you're missing out, right? And that's the whole difference between the concept of a developed country and a developing country. Because the developed country, the human beings have started to care for each other in a way, and it's not perfect. There is no perfect system, by the way, on this earth. There is no perfect political system. Like, as long as human beings are greedy, like, corruption will linger. But it's only when human beings get all macrocosmically greedy where we're going to transcend the microcosmic greed. That means, imagine let's say you're a bad guy in civilization. You're like, yo, how do I control all of this? Let's say you're one of those people, okay? Okay, let's say you're one of those people, and then you'll suddenly realize, okay, why do I want to control such a giant system? Why do I want my attention to be occupied by the control? They say the master and the slave is shackled by the master, and the master is shackled by the slave. That means the master is a slave to the slave. The slave is a master to the slave. A master to the master. What I mean is that where your attention is on, you're linked with that phenomenon. Right? If somebody is like an island, they're kind of like you can say, I mean, I don't want to give it this terminology, but just to kind of stay true to the metaphor, you're like a slave of that island. But the moment you go beyond that island, you have in some sense become a master of your moment. And the cool thing about life is that it is really like an exam, but it's an exam where you have to mark your own paper. There is no teacher that marks it, right? There could be a divine, I said theological lens, so I would say, sure, there is, let's say, eyes, the sky has eyes above a divine authority, let's say, but when it comes to man, honor what we are in its most simplest possibility, and then once we are content with the simple, there is nothing else left. Evolution becomes a gas pedal pressed by 8 billion human beings. The future awaits, is waiting for us. That means in our inner realms, the minds of certain human beings can be already in the future. Their psychology is not based on the past, it's not based on the present, but it's based on the potential future of humanity. and how there will come a day in human history where everybody on the planet will be shocked, because it will be that day where the first sky city is lifting into the air, and man has in some sense achieved an incredible victory against the unknown forces of extinction. Our victories are waiting, but they are not individual victories. They are literally how drops become a river and they run towards the ocean, right? And the ocean is the greatest possibility where we create a system that has so many backup systems. Even we mess up, we're good, we're in the clear, right? That means imagine a system where the individuals don't just care for their world. The world cares for the individual. Only human beings can provide this kind of advanced civilization, because the nature, I'll be honest, people can go hug trees as much as they want, but nature is also a cruel place. You can be in love with walk lovingly in nature and very peacefully, like Lao Tzu, where he would go on these silent walks at the end of his day, in nature. But you can also be like, okay, guys, something incredibly strange happened right now. I'm just gonna share it. A moth fell into my hand, and I threw it on my computer, and it's chilling on my computer right now. Anyways, to continue. The ears of nature, divinity of nature, is not something to be distrusted. When I say nature can be cruel, nature is actually something to be so trusted that in some sense it makes you realize what the world soul is doing before your own soul extracts purpose from the world. I would tell you that nature is my ultimate guru. That means I would say that there is no person that can teach anyone what the world can teach in one instant to the psyche. Everyone's eyes are their true teacher. And it doesn't matter what kind of being we are. It doesn't matter if we're a moth. It doesn't matter if we are a human being giving a podcast on a balcony. It doesn't matter if we're a lion chasing a gazelle. It doesn't matter if we are like a cold-blooded reptile under a lake or something. We are all organisms, and the act of organisms is pretty much information accumulation and then information expression, right? So we contain the world. That container becomes our identity. That identity becomes a container that can be filled with personality, right? And it's like that scene in movies where you see the person's like, hang on guys, I need to assist this moth on my computer keyboard. Just hang in there. Okay, there we go. Because the keyboard's temperature is pretty hot, the moth is like standing on lava. So. From protecting moths from, overheated laptops, Don't fear extinction, whoever you are. Try to reduce the percentage of it by how you live. An advanced civilization is an ultimate approach An ultimate approach is necessary. We have no honor system. Nobody gives a excuse my language. Nobody gives a shit about reality. They give a shit about their own reality. If we can find a way to make a person's own reality or simultaneously serve everybody's reality, it would be a win-win situation where the individual managed to be free, managed to live a life of a resourceful life, and at the same time, right, in some sense, it wasn't just preoccupied with the mechanisms of the biology, it in some sense also noticed the greater work of the mind that is accessible. Every person has a great work because every person has eyes that nobody else does. This is where your value comes in this life, really. That means when I even look at my own value as a person, I'm like, it has to be from how I'm looking at things. Because I could look at things in a completely different way and people would be like, oh my God, Mr. Within changed. But every day of our lives we're changing. Every moment that new information enters our psyche, the world context is turned. That means the world turns whether we like it or not, and we have to live with this reality. And of course there will be discomfort, right? And the whole aim of human life is to make the body comfortable enough so the great work of the mind can begin. Because if you just live as a body without a curiosity to figure out or try to tackle the hard problem of consciousness, for me, I respect David Chalmers, but I think there was a sort of slight what's the term I'm looking for? In his communication of the hard problem of consciousness, he made a very important philosophical claim, but the way I didn't like the way he introduced it, right? The way I think the hard problem of consciousness should have been introduced to human beings should have not been through a very peaceful TED Talk, but rather should have been, in some sense, through a shout at the civilization, a shout that, hey, we found one of the most important questions. Why are we conscious of why are we able to control certain biological functions, but certain biological functions are involuntary? They're not in the domain of our conscious free will, right? Why can a person move their hand, but they can't suddenly like shape shift the color of their skin, for example? Do you know? Right? Why do we have free will in certain domains of conscious biological experience, and why don't we have conscious control? Right? But the way this was introduced was just like a small pointer, as if the philosopher, who wasn't even invited to the scientific gathering, was like, hey, can I share something? But in reality, it should have been in some sense a kingdom. The continental philosophers have to roar, or the world will fall asleep to materialism. Right? And that roar is that the mystery stands. We don't know. Guys, hear what I'm saying. We are alive at a time in history where we don't know what we are. And no system of knowledge can contain it, especially if there's dimensions beyond the language threshold. Beyond the linguistic simulation where we're all being, nice people. And I mean, of course, certain levels of being a social creature is you gotta simulate yourself into the moment to be active in it. Right? It's as if people don't have personalities. It's just how their attention is moving in the space-time continuum. And of course, don't get me wrong, I respect any philosophical effort. Just the fact that David Chalmers shared the concept to me was an incredible achievement for philosophy. But I'm telling you, when you can see something better, why stop? Why stop there? When you can see the mystery of the mind staring at you in every reflection of matter in the awareness of the being, when you realize you are an awareness of a being, that moment when you realize that the sky and the world and colors, geometry and space have all come to see you, but not the idea of you, the presence of your being. You see, the ocean has a very giant presence, but when we go to touch it, we can only maybe hold a little bit of water in our hand. And when it comes to the true intelligence of the human being, the ego can just hold a little bit of itself in its hand. Really, we are the tip of an iceberg that hasn't realized a gigantic dimension of our intelligence is an unknown. And there's a reason Carl Jung said, unless you make the unconscious conscious, the unconscious will direct your life and you will call it fate. We want an advanced civilization, and in order to advance something, we have to be conscious of it. If a house is on fire and the person is not conscious, that limits their advancement, right? If you recognize that this planet, every moment you look at it, there is free will factors, that means when I see human beings, I honestly am seeing an unknown mind. Like, sure, you know, people can personalize reality. You know, there was that messed up scene in the movie Gladiator, very heartbreaking scene, but I gotta share it because it relates. There is a scene where in the Maximus, the main character in the film Gladiator, his child thinks his father's coming home, but it's the Roman soldiers sent to, in some sense, get rid of his family. It's as if, you know, it's like a very honorable, the whole film Gladiator is like a very honorable man is attacked by insecure cruelty, insecure extreme cruelty. And so that scene where the child is running, but the soldiers, and it's pretty messed up because if you see I think it's in the deleted scenes, maybe, where the horses trample the child that thinks it's Maximus that has returned. And the director, like Ridley Scott, like the editing of this film is so incredible, guys, because the scene where his wife and daughter in the movie are being killed in like their farm, Maximus is like, he's injured, but it's as if his intuition calls to him something, as if the soul of his moment is saying, run, you know, and he just, like, as fast as he can tries to get home, right? But then he ends up seeing that in some sense destiny was faster than him. Such an intense movie scene. But anyways, that child psychology, imagine if you're a person who everybody's been friendly to you, everybody has behaved towards you in a certain way, like the Buddha, and then you step out of the kingdom, right, and you suddenly notice that there's dimensions of reality of such intensity that you had not even considered, right? So the inner character has to, through multidimensional perception, cultivate greater collective strength in order to survive the future, right? That means it's as if for our inner realms it's becoming more intense, right? And the pilots of consciousness, they are the prime movers of information on the surface of the planet. Pretty much, you can say they're the human beings who, they have not been born on this planet to only communicate to other human beings. They have been born also to communicate with the world. Because the world soul, I firmly feel this is the case, that the world soul selects the minds of its expression, of its own expression. And I haven't even gone into this idea of different speeds of the psyche, right? Because psychology can be simulated at different speeds. If you're really going fast in your inner realms, you tend to not be emotional. Why? Because the events are changing quicker. That means, imagine, like in the inner realms, imagine your imagination is a teleportation device, but instead of teleporting you into a location, it teleports a location in you. And let's say the mind is like this giant spherical space, and memories are like sculptures just in the void of that space, right? So imagine when a person's remembering, they're not going through a file cabinet that's chronological. They are in like one spherical world view, and in some sense they are jumping from the branches of each memory, right? So that's a sort of internal teleportation where I can suddenly remember how I lived yesterday, and so who am I now? Am I in my inner realms? I'm who I was yesterday. I'm looking through those eyes, but right now I'm looking through these eyes. You see, so the mind is like this additional opportunity of intelligence to access itself in moments that have passed or in moments that have not happened yet. chat section's pretty quiet today. And guys, it's not like we know, right? There's so many things we don't know. I mean, take it in that I'm just honestly a tired person, just trying to touch the unspeakable before my eyes close for the day. If I was to share that, if I could put all the days I've lived on this planet in one sentence, I would put it as the first sentence I ever wrote, and I remember this was 2000, I think it was 2012 or 13, where I remember I wrote this sentence where I felt it was original from my own mind, and I wrote this sentence: I don't want to live in a world that looks the same the next day. And I will tell you, that is what it has been. It is literally like I am waking up to a giant movement. It's like being a human is like opening your eyes, again, as a character in a story. And this story is physical, but it also has a non-physical angle to it. It's as if the physical reality is the center of the circle, and in some sense there is endless degrees that any object can have, any degree of perception. That means knowledge is not limited to one person, figuring it out, because it's impossible. The brain is not that big of a storage device. So the best way our brains can be treated is as antennas. We are hopefully the friends of humanity if we are in the human design. A person's past could have been anything, A person could, if you believe in reincarnation, you could say the person in their past, they were an extraterrestrial, they were like a universe, they were, nothing, they were everything, like the past could be everything, right? The person's like, oh my God, in my past life, I was the empty space of the whole universe, it was so peaceful, Can you imagine having the, not biological, but having the space-based consciousness of a galaxy? That means, imagine we wake up and we know what's going on in our immediate local environment, like our brains, again, like a candle, lighting up the room. But I would say, can you imagine a galaxy waking up and seeing everything that's going on in a galaxy at once? Like that is epic to me. And I don't know, guys, sometimes when I give these talks, I'm like, am I giving these talks in the wrong timeline? Am I in the wrong parallel universe of Earth giving these talks? Like, am I talking too soon about something that maybe like in a couple hundred years should be talked about? And in all angles of self-judgment, that means there's been moments where I have unleashed the intensity of my own expression on myself. That means, imagine like a Shaolin monk being able to punch like this, stone and break it, right, with like a special punch that the Shaolin monks have. Now imagine that Shaolin monk punching himself, but it's not physical. It means the same intensity overlaid. That means I have been the wrath of the divine for myself in certain moments. Right? Certain moments of turbulence, I have in some sense literally shut down my inner realms. That means it's as if the mind is being too broken by emotions, pulling it to a reality, and the logical systems of thought of the physical state kind of pulling it. That means a person can get torn apart if they want to identify with a multidimensional state. They can get torn apart by the dimensions. And I'm saying that in the sense not like something they get torn apart, but it's just that there can be no ego when there's multiple dimensions, because then what ego is it? The ego of which dimension is it, right? If I choose to see, imagine a light beam, imagine the background of a Pink Floyd album, where a Pink Floyd album cover where a light beam going through a prism, and that light beam becomes RGB, the color spectrum. Now, if we choose to see a color spectrum, we can say there's different types of light. But if we just see, the light before it goes to the prism, it is in some sense singular. So light could be a singular phenomena, but we are receiving it multidimensionally. Now, the issue with singularity is that we have thought has possessed the individual. And when I say possess, I don't mean it from per se a religious connotation. I mean it in the sense that the attention has stopped exploring its moment. And so when the spirit of this discovery is exiled, the gods get angry. Poetically, the lords of the dimension get angry. Right? Because man, in some sense, his update is in some sense, it's like, it's like if the drop doesn't become a stream and a river and go to the ocean, it will evaporate. And so we are at a phase in human consciousness where we are like individual drops. If we become a river, we realize based on the way we're living and the collective spirit we're animating, we can't die. That means our minds live too honorably for an advanced vision, that it's like they cannot be unidentified with that advanced vision. Can you imagine a time traveler, going to a Zen master, and the time traveler's like, "Hey Zen master, I came from the future to request your teachings." And the Zen master's like, "Buddy, I don't see time. There's no such thing as time. There's just one huge here and now, and everything starts from there." But the time traveler's like, "No man, I came from the future." And so imagine a giant, discussion between a Zen master and a time traveler. The time traveler's like, "Buddy, I'm telling you, there is a future. I came from there." And the Zen master's like, "No, the future is emptiness. There's emptiness in the future, right?" And the time traveler's like, "You're not wrong, but you're not right either." And so what I'm really saying, guys, is society is an opportunity for individuals to animate to each other. We don't have an honorable collective story. The advanced civilization is that honorable collective story of human beings in their inner realms behave in accordance to a better world. That realms has no choice to follow the mind of the person. Right? So really, the only reason human beings require to be governed is because they can't be responsible for all dimensions of their life, right? So we have, like, many people see governments in a bad light, but to me, it's like they are like right now they're kind of like the big brother, but in the future I perceive all governments to become the older brother. That means the older brother doesn't take anything away from the younger brother unless it's bad for it, right? Doesn't take anything away for it unless it's bad for it, but is always there to provide resources for the younger brother, right? And what that means is I see all positions, all institutions of power suddenly awakening, suddenly getting enlightened, realizing, oh my God, what are we doing with these power control games? It's just creatures on a rock, and how can we give them the best experience before they leave this terminal of human life, this airport of, it's as if we're tourists again, right? So I am saying, let's create the greatest tourist experience known in history. And without multidimensional tolerance, we cannot connect to the same server. That means in order for me to even, when I'm thinking about it, let's say you're a human being born born from a certain part of the world, certain ideology, you've been raised through a certain ideology, then you're like, okay, how do 8 billion uniquely raised, creatures kind of find a collective space to communicate? And it's only if we value the same thing. So the axiology of the individual life, the inner life, and the axiology of the outer life have to be met. How we're valuing a system behind our eyes have to synchronize. Brain has guys, I don't know if this was being heard or not. Oh my God, I'll say it again. It's like our heart is the intent of our simplest self, and our brain is the intent of our most complex self. It's like a person, they ask the person, hey man, do you believe in spirit guides? The person's like, no, I don't believe in spirit guides. And then they're like, do you believe in aliens? The person's like, no, I don't consider aliens. Then they say, do you believe in like, the logos? And the person's like, yeah, sure, but no, I don't believe in the logos. Then they say, what do you believe in? And the person says, I believe that beyond the veil of our senses, our future selves are legitimately the gods that are watching us now. We are being the memory of our future self, which means in every moment you live, you are being a type of memory which you will animate in the future to fulfilling that memory. So most likely me being a person talking about advanced civilizations before the end of my life or before my moment of exit, or let's say whenever that time comes, I have to literally put everything away. I gotta literally put down every idea I have ever known and engage in anything that I have invented and I have to detach myself from everything and just watch the moment as the unknown presence. Because I know that moment will inevitably come, I don't fear the unknown presence, but I wonder about what can I do with my known individual personality before I enter the unknown. And aside from the advanced civilization, I don't see any greater idea. Like, I'm waiting. I have my email in the channel description. People can send me an email if you can challenge me and tell me in the outer realms what is greater than an advanced civilization. What greater thing can creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere do? Right? And in the inner realms, other than advance in communication, which is synonymous to the notion of enlightenment and self-inquiry and moksha, it's as if the body's life is like a soldier, where the soldier's like, I just want to serve my mind before I leave, And so the mind, the commanding officer, is like, all right, the body wants to serve me, my biological existence is serving me now. And so the commanding officer is gazing at the world, and it's like, the world is too unknown. I need to request information from the general. So the mind becomes still, and then the soul enters the room poetically. You meet your own soul. And when you meet your own soul, it just means the mind finds itself in an unknown consciousness. And even though that term is paradoxical, you should only hear it in the context I'm sharing here. When the unknown, you experience that with the unknown, something very hilarious happens. Anytime you experience something beyond sensory perception, regardless of how you got to that state of mind. But I'm just saying, like, when you do experience something like that, the whole psychology of an individual in one dimension has to be like, okay, what do I do with the hallucinatory nature of a projected outer realm, So it's as if I'm telling you, there's ways of living on this earth where you realize you are a field of intelligence and your body is a particle in this field moving. When you realize that you are the field, you have no fear, so you become a sort of eternal witness of your own temporary biological opportunity. Please tell me this is on mute. Okay. My mother, when I was was young, when I was really young, told me to be a good person, you know. And when I was young, I just automatically trusted the universe. And I lived through that archetype, but then a challenge arose, a puzzle arose. I loved puzzles as a kid, so a puzzle arose where how can I be a good person if the world is not good? You know? And now, I would say, in 2021, I was born 1991, the only way to have an efficient humanism is to make the space where the humanity is happening efficient. Not only we need an architectural revolution all over the planet, not only do we need all politicians to have creative advisors. There's two brain hemispheres, you know. We consider it as the analytical, the left brain hemisphere being the analytical, and the right brain hemisphere being the creative. And you know what's hilarious? The left part of our brain, there's an inverse relationship with how the brain and the body is happening. The left part of your brain is controlling the right side of your body. The right side of your body is controlling the left side of your body, right? I'll tell you this next level story. Something that happened to me. I found myself in Italy in a town called Mozzate, and there was an Egyptian kind of like shawarma kebab shop, okay? And so I just come from the airport terminal, and I just checked into the hotel, and I went outside to eat something, and I go to this kebab shop, and I see that on the screen they have like a TV, and it's showing like a live stream of like Mecca, so it was like a Muslim environment. And then the owners are there, right? And I go in there and I make an order, and I get the pizza, and so I just wait there, and the pizza comes. And I've been, like, I'm from Iran, so in my youth when I was 14, through my grandmother's blessing, like I've actually been to Mecca. I've been to Mecca, where, what do you call it? Where the Islamic faith circles around. And so I start saying something like this, but check this out, guys. I'm eating the pizza with my left hand. And this guy turns around to me with broken English and tells me, don't eat with the left hand, that's shaitan. Right? Can you imagine eating pizza tired, you know? And the pizza owner telling you not to eat the pizza with your left hand because it has something to do with shaitan in a sort of cultural Islamic context of meaning, right? And to me, I was like, it shocked me. I was like, okay, that makes no sense, in the sense that it's like God created two hands. That means if we're not meant to use our left hand, what's the point of both of it being there? Like, I was having these in my inner realms, right? But in regards to what I explained earlier, if we say the right side of the brain controls the left side of the biological body, so the left hand is the movement of the right side of the brain, and the right side of the brain is creativity. It could be this notion that in metaphysical, in religious thought, multidimensionality was treated as blasphemy because it would change how the religion was being kept to itself. Now, of course, this is just language embodiment, really, in every moment. That means on some level, we're just human beings, and we're sharing our realities, right? But our realities are how our eyes have so far opened to the world, right? And so that was a very hilarious experience I had, you know, where I didn't know eating pizza with your left hand could be a sin, you know. But the whole idea was like, you know, I think it has to do with the urge of disciplined freedom. It's as if in the eastern part of the world, they honored discipline more than freedom. And in the western side of the world, they honored freedom more than discipline. So ancient thought is like reality is that this is not the only world. So stay true to the discipline of like your self-awareness and through whatever system you have. That means on some level it doesn't matter. Like imagine ideology is like clothing, right? So the person is not the clothing they wear. You know, a person can come up to me and say, I believe this, Mr. Within, and I'll be like, okay, you know, you wear that hat often, you know? So for me, it's like language is not truth, but it could be a sort of shadow of the truth. You know, just like how in religious thought, there's this notion that man was made in the image of God, language is made in the image of man. Right? When it comes to communication, there's a strange piloting freedom. I would say when it comes to the inner verse, it's as if in front of our eyes we're in a world, behind our eyes we are a world. That being into experiential being surpasses any ideological form. So do you see why in these talks I keep kind of like try to fly around an idea that is actually rooted in the language threshold? And questions are welcome, by the way, guys, because the only purpose of this being a live stream is just to provide an engagement for the audience, really. Because I can give these talks, just record them on my phone and upload them, you know. But the point I think that they're a live stream is that as the poet Rumi says, wherever you are, be the soul of that moment. And I would say a question makes the world multidimensional, and an answer makes the world singular. An answer closes a world, a question opens a world, you know, and it's really just piloting in the space-time continuum to different modalities of the moment itself. Extinction is expected, and advanced civilization is the genius chess move. The moment we realize we're playing chess with the universe, it's as if you sit straight on your chair, you know, and you play a chess game like you've never played before. You know, sometimes I've played chess games, and in the chess game, I've emotionally connected myself to the chess pieces, where actually, if like forget the chess game, this is like my kingdom, and this kingdom is at war with another kingdom, right? And then when you play chess, the significance of every move is like an advancement towards your kingdom. Do you see what I mean? Or how you value the moment. So Kushbu K says, can you explain more deeper about freedom and discipline? We're a biological animal that if it repeats something, it masters it. Discipline is repetition. Freedom is what this discipline gives you, right? And not everybody has discipline in all dimensions of their life, but all human beings can have discipline at least in one dimension. You know, you can at least, you know, it's like a person can't do everything. There's so many things to do in this life, but a person can at least try to do one thing and try to tunnel through that one thing to, in some sense, see what is the furthest human sight of that edge, you know. Okay, so Kushbu, I'll answer your question like this. I'll say we find ourselves inside a system. This system changes. As it changes, we perceive first-person point of view from our eyes, the change in that system, and we give it a value in regards to, did the system become better or did it become worse? If it becomes better, it doesn't matter if the tactic is discipline or not discipline. If it makes the world better, it is victorious in that way, right? So it's not that everybody should be disciplined, because then the artist would be like, excuse me, you know, we're not robots here. So there would be something where You know, so it would be something where what I feel is going to happen is a lot of the human discipline is being used to preserve the human biology. Most likely in the future, an advanced civilization will be so resourceful that nobody actually is going to survive, right? You know, the desires of a person being a being that is being mind first, then a body, and a desire of a being that is being a body and a mind first are different, right? If you're being a mind, you are actually looking at life through a creator modality of time. That means it's as if we say, is the body in time? Everybody's going to be like, yes, Mr. Within, the body is in time. You know, the body moves in time. Yes, yes, yes. You know, but I'll be like, wait a minute. Does the mind move in time? And the mind creates the concept of time. That means the creator of the concept of time is not in time, right? So we need discipline until we come to a realization of an edgeless universe's potential. Because think of it, forget the concept of discipline and freedom. It's just eyes opening and then decisions being made. That's it. Right? If the decision is repetitive, the person has discipline in a certain angle, like as if they're concentrating their whole universe's behavior towards something, right? But if a person, in some sense, let's say, seeks freedom more than discipline, let's say there's a 50% freedom, 50% discipline, and discipline is kind of like the absence of freedom because you're sacrificing one thing in order to be able to do something else. It's like an opportunity cost, discipline, right? It's kind of like that story where there was a grasshopper and there was an ant, okay? And the ant was working every day, and the grasshopper was like, buddy, what are you doing? You know, enjoy the sunny day, you know, come and just lie down on this giant, you know, corn city. You know what I mean? And the ant was like, I can't, I'm too busy working, I gotta prepare. And the ant just looks at the grasshopper and says, I can't because winter is coming. Right? So the ant says, I can't, I'm working to preserve myself for the winter. As if the ant is like a fortune teller, has seen the future, the grasshopper hasn't. Right? The grasshopper's like, YOLO, you only live once, you know? Who gives a shit? You know, just find a comfortable chair and enjoy the world before it ends, right? And the ant is like, no, something is coming. Winter is coming. You know, something's gonna happen on this planet. Right? So in some sense, the ant doesn't say that. I mean, of course, this is an ancient story, I'm saying. Like an old story. So the ant says no, and the ant keeps working, and the grasshopper's like, look at this idiot, you know, not enjoying, you know, his life, you know. And so winter suddenly comes, and the grasshopper wakes up one morning and feels like a breeze that's like extinction to it. And the grasshopper runs and goes to the ant, and you know, it's like, let's say, a kind of three-dimensional anthill rather than a three-dimensional anthill in the ground. And the grasshopper knocks on the, you know, ant kingdom, you know, and the ant's like, yo man, what's up, you know, and the grasshopper's like, you know, man, you were right. You know, and so the ant's like, welcome to the ant kingdom. You know what I mean? So the ant lets the grasshopper stay, and this is a story, you know, like a bedtime story. But I'm telling you, the whole idea is that discipline is preparing for the future, and freedom doesn't have a future; it is free beyond it, right? So those people who are artists, they're in the creative state. They have a sort of wilderness. That means true art is like, believe it or not, it's like the animalistic instinct synchronized with human conscious effort of geometrical projection. That means to be an artist in the world means that you have found yourself in a giant artwork that is being repainted by free will all the time. Discipline is necessary. There's so many great books on this. I would recommend people to read 12 Rules on Life and like the second book after that. Jordan Peterson talks about that we have to choose our sacrifice in life. That means it's like at some point people will realize, oh my God, there's emptiness here, right? So we choose what we do with our life force while we're in it, and people can have different strategies, There was a time where I would write to-do lists for myself, and then I was like, what am I doing? It was like an art project, because I realized the mind has to be piloted from the present. That's when you can have efficiency. That's when you are, galloping on the logos, towards the nostalgia of what eternity could have done from the start. It's as if there is a God that in some sense positioned man and through the theological lens onto an earth, right? Like, so from the, maybe I should get into this and share this view. In theology, it was as if man's mistake, right? There was a mistake made at an ultimate state of being. And from that ultimate state, there was a dissension. And in this dissension, man was not alone, and man found himself in a world created until man recognizes his virtue. That means it's I forget the concept, the word for it, it's the garb of piety. The garb of piety. Through the garb of piety, in the religious angle, the human being that is on earth, which is being the creation of the ultimate creator, the creation in how it utilizes its free will accesses truth. That means literally life is like this. You gotta type in this, to the religious mind at least, it's like you gotta type in this specific code, this specific password, and if you type it correctly, it opens, right? So it's like the religious person is trying to live in accordance to the principles of their faith in order for them to go to afterlife and find a heaven, where in a lot of religious scholars, when it comes to explaining heaven, they say there's this view that there's one heaven, we all go inside, or every person goes into their own heaven, and heaven is a common state, you see. That means rather than a person being caught by belief, we realize that man is here to be aware of the body's life and the mind's life, and to recognize all faith. Like, it doesn't matter, because we're human beings. Because you see, this is what all ideologies have in common: their human relationship, right? That means in the religious narrative, it's happening to humans, right? In the philosophical narrative, it's happening to humans. In the scientific narrative, it's happening to the humans. In the spiritual narrative, it's something that's happening to the humans. In all linguistic stories of the world, the human character is the common link. So if we build a system that in some sense honors the humanism and then allows itself to engage the multidimensional, I see an ultimate victory for the creative or the analytical individual. Because let me tell you how advanced civilizations come about. They are ushered in. The idea of them finds the world. It's as if it's like the advanced civilization already exists behind our eyes, but it's our voices are like trying to pull this advanced civilization from behind our eyes to in front of it, And it's like it's the task of 8 billion human beings, right? And if you are a really creative person, you try to attain an unconditionally creative state. And what that means is you want to find a state of mind where with the least energy you perceive the most. And believe it or not, as Leonardo da Vinci is very spot on says, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So anybody who wants to understand art, if you don't have a reverence for the simple, you will if you don't honor the emptiness of the page, you will not be able to allow the arrival of the masterpiece through, drawing the masterpiece. That means sometimes you gotta honor the space, right? There's some people, this is something where many people don't know about. Maybe I should share about a sort of Islamic culture, right? So in Islamic cultures, let's say you're on a theocracy, women have to wear hijab, and what that means is it's not just women who have to wear hijab. The men also have to wear an ideological hijab, And so what that means is when let's say there's a household, and the husband is at work, and so the household is there, and there's a mother with young kids, and let's say they call like a serviceman, somebody to come and fix the air conditioning or something, So when that person comes to the door to enter the house, in an Islamic context, just to explain to you the psychology, the person enters the room and he says, Ya Allah, and what he means is he makes known his presence, right? And he doesn't enter the door until he's, in some sense, invited by women who are fully clothed. Do you see? So it's remarkable psychology to witness, to be honest, right? It's as if the ideological system was so extreme that it also creates extreme behaviorism for the character, for the person, right? It's as if your environment, it doesn't have a physical influence on you only, it also has an incredible non-physical influence on you, right? But there was something strange where it was as if by projecting a veil, by creating a wall between two inner realms, each inner realm attends its own. Do you see what I mean? I'm trying to say that there is an honor for the inner psychology of the human being, right? It's as if behind every person's eyes there's an unknown world. And when this unknown world is honored, humanity has in some sense made one of the first steps towards collective advancement. We have to start caring for the worlds behind our eyes as rare information that we have only one lifetime to share, right? It's not about even the quality of information, it's just human beings being like, okay, what can we do on a rock in the middle of nowhere? Information accumulation has been the main game. Now, information accumulation has reached a point where there isn't enough explorers. It's like we're reaching a time where I would say, if I was to explain academia in 2021, it's like 80% scribes and maybe 20% explorers. But it should be the opposite. There should be 20% scribes and technology recording everything else for us, and 80% of human thought, not obsessed in what past idea is true now, but rather from now, how can we see the future approaching us? The poet Hafiz, this Sufi mystic, he says, "One regret, dear world, I wish not to have on my deathbed, is that I did not kiss you enough." And what he means is that one regret, dear conscious universe, that I hope not to have before I exit, is that I experienced what was going on here. Do you see? Like the true dimensions of what was going on here. Right? That means really it's like a seriousness with your psychology, but because the mind is not an object, the playful state accesses can pilot through the inner realms very easily. That means I would say people don't realize this, and even though modern stand-up comedy is kind of like a bit intentionally filthy, but I'll tell you, there is something about the comedic mind that is jumping between dimensions of a concept, right? So I would say humor is like a knight of the realm, spelled Knight, Psychology in multidimensional states through humor, through joy, through peacefulness, through simplicity, through patience, the psychology can really access incredible inner perception, right? But if the person is piloting their life in a way where it's turbulent, then they are left to their own eyes being their savior. Okay, so Justin Z says, question. Do you think we lack a holistic sense of the relationship between motivation and discipline? As if our spirit psyche has two wings, one wing is mind and one wing is heart. Do most humans only ... Okay, do most humans only flap one wing at a time? No. I wouldn't say that. I would say the brain is a two-winged instrument. That means you're actually flapping both wings in order to exist as an individual, right? That means your mind, the imagine, so your both eyes are open at the same time, and then you are seeing one moment, right? So it's the same thing, right? Both dimensions are simultaneously present, and you're witnessing it. Now, the witness cannot be defined by any of the dimensions, so it's your choice on how to see it. But even Rumi says, like, the brain functions, like the two wings of a bird that have to be flapped at the same time, even though there is that analogy. But really, I would say it's just an activation point. That means what people think is creativity is a realization that you were an antenna from the beginning. And when you realize you're an antenna, it's as if, like, here's the thing, this is how I'm kind of classifying information in the world. Information where I move first, then I receive it, and information where I don't move first and I receive it. And information that I don't know, I don't move first and I receive it. That means, imagine the person's, like, the issue is not having an imagination. The issue is what to do in your imagination, And so let's say a person imagines this very next level universe, but in that universe they're not doing anything. They're just standing still in an imagine in an inner realm universe. Imagine if we were to think like what it would be like to stand on Mars or Jupiter, right? Or a moon of Jupiter, if we were to fathom what it would be like to stand on that, that's like an inner location, right? Like, when I say imagine, like, standing on the moon, people can imagine standing on a white surface, right? Like, our brains provide that access. So in the inner realms, what I tend to do is I stop moving. So it's like there's an outer stillness that makes you notice your mind is moving. But after, I would say, 20 minutes, so 10 minutes of meditation, you notice your body is still. You notice your inner realms move. After 20 minutes of just simple being in the moment, after 20 minutes of meditation, I would say you start noticing something more than the mind. And when you notice something more than the mind, what tends to happen when man meets the unknown? He freezes. That means before there's fight or flight, there's a pause where that's being decided if one should fight or flight. You know what I mean? I would say our motivation is lacking a blueprint. That means we don't know what to do with the future. That's the absence of motivation. And then discipline is, unless we know what we want to do in the future, how can we have proper discipline towards it, right? So we gotta have a collective, they call this ethos, ETHOS, right? Ethos is the story that inspires a collective, a story that inspires all people, right? For example, the gods walking on clouds in ancient Greece, that was a story that in some sense all the people connected to, right? Now I'm saying in modern times, the advanced civilization and, civilization 2.0, as I've termed it, it's like that's the new, I feel that should be the new ethos, anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. And just to make sure I answered all questions. I think we lack, not that we lack it, we have forgotten our holistic sense of the relationship. Now you say between motivation and discipline, so you're pretty much saying the mind and the brain and the heart, right? So have we forgotten the union of the brain and the heart? 100%. And are people just flapping one wing in regards to you? So you're suggesting that people are just living as brains now? Sure, yeah. But I would say we're actually a non-human awareness of a human consciousness. Beyond the human archetype, there is so much that can happen. A human being can, in some sense, turn to geometry. A human being can turn to light. A human being can vanish. Do you see? Like that's pretty much time. What time does? Time is like the great magician. You know, it's like, hey, you see this thing here? Ta-da! It doesn't exist in thousands and thousands of years in the future. You know. I feel that our heart and brain are accessible. It's just we're not aware. That means it's as if the person has a vehicle, a biological vehicle, and it's like, imagine it's a manual car, and as you speed up, then there's more pressure on the engine, so the gear has to change. So as you're driving the manual car, it's as if somebody not realizing the gear has to change. That's it, exactly. So it's like we are. You know what it is? It's as if we are like very intelligent beings, but we're too distracted by the story that our personalities were born through. So there has to be a deeper state of mind. And yesterday I was talking about it in an episode, where we have to become universal beings if we want world peace. You know, it's like they say, if you want to do something, do it so many steps ahead that just a few steps becomes easy for you, right? So if we think about this for the human species, it's like we want such an advanced civilization that for all of us to be united and working together is just the first like just starting point. It's nothing. It's not even an achievement if we all united. That means what I'm saying is the advanced civilization is so advanced that world peace is not that big of an achievement. But it's like it's assumed, you know, it's assumed that any human being that is active as a mind on this earth, that if you have witnessed a realm of intelligence, then to only or navigate as a violent body is an error, right? It's kind of like it. I wouldn't say it's the greatest sin of humanity is not to see its own potential. That is the only way I would use the word sin in this context. You know, we could have done something better, we didn't. That would be the ultimate regret. The phoenix resurrects from the ashes, and civilization 1.0 is kind of like, you know, let's say it's not, the world's not burning anymore, it's in ashes now, and from the ashes of the ancient efforts we in some sense rekindle. That means civilization 2.0 will be the greatest friend of the human universe. By the way, guys, I've pretty much reached the end of the talk. People can ask questions at this point. All that the talk was aiming to communicate is that we know what's coming, potentially extinction. And so what do? we freak out, then we calm down, and then we build an advanced civilization. So stay calm and, build an advanced civilization, pretty much. That's my message of this episode, guys. Keep calm and build, that advanced civilization, That's pretty much the logos, Every day I wake up, the logos is like, have you told them of the advanced civilization yet? And I'm like, all right, mind that fathoms, this potential. And I'll be honest, really, the moment to me is the Yoga Patanjali Sutras shared the greatest metaphor. Our mind is like a glass orb moving on different colored surfaces. Any surface it goes on, it takes that color. So, intelligence, or the origin of intelligence is the origin of fathomable freedom. I'm just saying that we have a responsibility, not as just bodies in the world, as minds too. A person's body, it has a certain form. A person's mind can adjust all the time. Freedom is behind our eyes. Everybody is free. Who are we kidding? Every day we wake up, it's like a new origin of reality, right? We're free. Everybody that really, like when everybody who wakes up tomorrow, it's like you forget yesterday and you move on, right? So what is that? That is freedom. So you can say freedom is how witnessing from an unconscious state enters a conscious state, pilots in that conscious state before it enters the unconscious state. And you become an advanced communicator and a true pilot when you become a human being that for the first time you have gotten bored with the repetitive karmic, lifetime cycle of good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. It's like enough. The mother soul, enters the room suddenly, It's as if the commanding officer is delaying. Poetically, the mind isn't delaying what the soul intends, or the soul knows, or what it's like, Guys, I'm probably gonna create a t-shirt as merchandise for this channel called, keep calm and build that civilization. An advanced civilization, guys, it's pretty much like if Beethoven was alive and Beethoven and Mozart were alive, they'd be like that idea is equivalent to the greatest music, because in the most advanced civilization there would be the greatest music, right? I'm pretty much saying that instead of getting tossed around between our archetypes of weakness and strength in regards to how the character simulates in the moment, we actually just select. We're like, okay, so many things we can do on this planet, let's select the advanced civilization. And the advanced civilization wants to start off in such an advanced way that we don't want to fight civilization 1.0 in any way. That means it's like civilization 2.0. Listen to Isaac Asimov when he said violence is the last refuge of the incompetent. That means the less violence we have, the more that energy of violence will go into our inner realms, right? So let's say there was this article that a long time ago, it said like human beings are using 12% of their brain, and what about that like 88%? That 88% is being achieved when we stop identifying with the truths of the 12% of the brain activation, for example. Dear listeners, nobody knows better than you as an intelligent origin point of how sight has to fit a context of meaning. If I was to say how the future educational system would be by middle school, the children of the future educational system will have as much biological knowledge as a doctor. They would have, in some sense, as much knowledge as the greatest designers on this earth. That means we want to create an educational system that is like endlessly giving waves of the next best type of human beings, best kind of human beings, best kind of human beings. What would it look like? What would it look like? And it's like those are the sounds of the gallop of the educational system towards the unknown mysteries of neurology. For the first time, we gotta take the concept of a human empire seriously, but not an empire in one dimension of thought. An empire in 8 billion dimensions of thought, and even more in accordance to what happens here. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening, and I hope this episode was helpful. Whoever the artist of this picture was, is definite evidence that the future can find you in your inner realms before it's actually there in the outer realms. Our minds are the greatest tool we will ever find. And even as Sun Tzu in The Art of War says, the great warrior, he in some sense defeats the opponent without moving his sword. That means your mind, your intelligence resolved the physical situation. That means imagine the movie Star Wars, and like one of those good Jedis, and like those robots are running to the Jedi, those clone drones or whatever, and so the Jedi just raises his hand and all the drones kind of pile up into a sphere in the air, imagine, right? Now I could say it's like the same. It's like there's a similar pattern. Where we decide on the relationship of what is introduced into our experience. Really what this means is there is no really, and like the great enlightenment of humanity has been to realize the world is more multidimensional than a singular thought, than we could have singularly thought. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. We advance in the outer realms, we advance civilization in the inner realms, we advance communication, and beyond good and evil, there's so many ways the world hasn't moved yet and is waiting for us to discover it. There's no greater honor than exploring an unknown universe through your temporary opportunity, and then it's just instinctual because we lived in hunter-gatherer societies. We want to find something new and bring it back to the tribe and have the tribe advance, right? But now we got to do this globally through a new archetypal context shifting, where we are no longer humans on Earth. We are, in some sense, an unknown intelligence moving through a known universe. Because there's even an approach to freedom where they say that the only way you can be free is to have been free from the beginning. That means there's nothing left there. It's as if karma, for the first time, became your ally. That means even karma, the karma of the universe was, the planets, the world soul was like, yeah, it's time for the advanced civilization. It's time for human beings to be granted such internal freedom that the greatest ideas, that means it's like with the one thing that 100% should get extinct is shyness in the future. You know, the great shyness extinction, where human beings realize they're just a very advanced biological opportunity to translate inner findings of realism towards outer findings of realism. And meanwhile, I'm saying all of this, guys, even though it may sound technical, I'm kind of approaching this, but I'm telling you, I have not forgotten that in the simplest levels of life needs no ideological system. So the only reason I'm sharing an ideological system is because we're ideological entities. If the advanced civilization gets to a point where language is not the captain of the ship, then nature's presence is most likely steering us, and then it would be an era where I call it an evolutionary return to nature, where human beings for the first time realize that they are the living earth. They are the breathing earth. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening, and please consider becoming a member to access this archive. And there's going to be project supporter meetings where I'm just waiting for the members to increase and then kind of start. And the project supporter meetings, I'm going to talk about this idea of an advanced civilization, but in a way where everybody in the project supporter meeting is like a designer. We're all designers looking at some design on a table and having opinions on it, right? But it's of a global context, you know. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope you remember the advanced civilization